welcome to What's Your Process? Today, I am joined by Tas Bober, founder of Delphinium Solutions. How's it going, Tas?
It is going amazing. I'm so excited for the show. So let's dig in.
Absolutely. I'm super pumped. What do people need to know about you?
Yeah. So the short version is that I was in-house working at B2B companies for the last 15 years. There was a 3-year period I was an AE, most difficult job I've ever had, but I think made me a better marketer. Transitioned into digital when I saw real-time data, kind of fell in love with that. And the back half I spent in B2B SaaS, where I led a couple of digital and website teams. And my claim to fame is that I have somehow managed and redesigned most of 400 websites. And over the last year and a half, I've been solo on my own, running my consultancy, which is a niche consultancy specializing in paid ads landing pages for growth stage B2B SaaS. So why am I an expert on the topic? It's because I've had a lot of reps and a lot of F-ups.
That's awesome. Also, I just love that you went with my claim to fame. That's the best intro anyone's had thus far. Yeah. Sorry, other guests. You're all great, but Tas wins. I love that point on like reps and F-ups, because I think that's ultimately how you get there, right? And that leads to the next question, which is, what is one thing you're world class at?
Getting better every day, but I would say that I'm pretty close to world class in landing pages. But I mean, landing pages teaches me things about marketing every day. I have changed so many opinions even in the last 3 months. So world class at continuing to F it up and seeing how much more insights and learnings and applications that I have, for these things going forward. So yeah, landing pages.
It's interesting hearing you talk about it this way, because it really is trial and error. And I think there's something to be said about this 3-month window that you're talking about, where everything is changing now, right? There's still the marketing principles and behaviors and things like that, but technology is changing, approaches are changing, attention spans are changing, audiences are changing, right? I think it's probably what makes you so good at what you do is the fact that you're aware of these and adapting your opinions and changing them over time, as opposed to in 2016, this is the way we did it, so this is the way you should do it now in 2024, right? That's just never going to work.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you learn so much of that from peers on LinkedIn, because you have a way that you're thinking about something. But I think one shared thing that we all have is we're on there talking about a different perspective on the same things. And I think that's important, is to say, oh, you know what? I never thought about it that way, but that totally makes sense, or it doesn't make sense. And so, if you ask someone, what's the most important part of your landing page? Someone would say, well, obviously the hero. And 6 months ago, a year ago, when I was director of digital and website, and someone asked me that, I'd be 100% the hero. But the truth is, after dozens and dozens of experiments, the actual most important part is the FAQ block, which is so much further down on the page. And so you just learn things like that, where you're saying, oh, that is so interesting to me. And then defining what important is. Is it just the one that takes up the most room, or is it the one that generates the most engagement and, that users consume the most? So yeah, there's so much there. And you wouldn't think that there would be with just, it's a little bitty landing page. There's so many different components, but that's also what makes it so much fun.
That's really cool. I love that. And FAQ, I would have never guessed that.
I didn't either. Not either.
That leads us to, I guess, the meat of this thing, because I need to know how you got to this discovery, right? I'd love to dig into your process for building landing pages, right? The audience for the show is primarily B2B. I'd imagine. We obviously haven't launched it yet, but that means that there have been cumulatively a lot of landing pages launched. Especially between you and me, I can only imagine how many thousands at this point that have been created. But everyone kind of thinks that there's some best practices. Everyone kind of thinks that there's a single way to do it, or historically there's been a single way to do it, right? But you're the pro. And I would love to hear how you approach it. So, when you think about your process for building landing pages, where do you start?
Yeah, so I always apologize to my clients. That's how I start my engagements, because I say, I'm going to start by apologizing you, because I kind of catfished you into this, because the beginning third of our engagement and relationship, it has nothing to do with landing pages at all. I'm not going to look at your old ones. I don't really care about them at all, other than maybe just some benchmark data on how they've performed. But everything that we're going to do is really focused on who you are as a company, who you serve, what problems that you're solving, which seem like the standard answers. And everyone that I've talked to who have, they're like SEO consultants or website people and, RevOps or whatever. So everyone does the same thing in different ways. So that's kind of what I figured out. But what I wanted was, I was in-house for most of my career. I knew that there were certain things that I wanted to solve for and incorporate if I ever went out on my own. And certain things were not locking anyone into a retainer. I hated that when I would try to hire consultants in-house. Stay with us for a year. For what? Most of the work's going to be done the front end, and then you're just cashing in. And I wanted to make sure that I wasn't just giving them strategy, because everybody and their brother gives them strategy. And marketers today have lean teams and they need someone to do the work, but also have the foresight and thought process to connect the two. I'm going to give you the strategy, but I'm also going to check an item off your list for you to release that burden from your plate. And you know that something's getting done. They have a tangible deliverable by the end. And then is there a way that I can create something that they can repurpose and use forever? So like one-time investment, forever dividends, and essentially something that's also efficient so they wouldn't have to do it from scratch again if they ever wanted to revisit or create a variation without having to pay me again. Putting all of that together, I came up with a 90-day sprint. And this timeline has changed over time. At first, it was like 6 weeks, then 10 weeks, and then now it's just a solid 3 months. So they get 90 days, a full quarter of my time. And the first 30 days are spent basically level setting on what they offer. And I work primarily with B2B SaaS, some service companies, but I map out in Figma. And this is where like it's nice, with the process thing too, being able to do like more of a screen share. But maybe that can be like a link we can add kind of later so they can see, I can provide like a template or something so people can look at it. But I call this a buyer's journey map. And when I was in-house as a marketer, I was also a buyer. I was the head of digital and website. I had huge budgets, right? Like $1 million just in contractors and tools that I would have to purchase in order to keep digital sustained. Something that was so interesting to me, and I only realized this later, was the way I market my company's product and the way I buy software are two totally different things. They are completely disconnected processes, because I would market a certain way, but the way I'd buy, I would be so annoyed by the same things that I was doing to my buyers that other marketers were doing to me. So at that point, I'm like, okay, what are all of the informational points I need to collect in order to make this decision about who I'm considering for this specific software problem? As a buyer internally, if I talk to my boss and I'm like, hey, we need a new translation tool. She's like, okay, why? Well, because we're having XYZ problem. She goes, okay, how much is it going to cost me? That is literally the question.
Always.
And how many B2B companies hide their pricing?
Majority of them.
Majority of them. And so I would go to Reddit, I would text a peer, and I'm like, hey, I'm evaluating XYZ. Have you done it? Yes. Oh, okay. How much are you paying? And then when they come back to me and I talk to the software company and they're quoting me 20, 30 grand over, that's not a good look. So do you want someone else to control the narrative, or do you want to? So I map out all of the information that a buyer would likely need to collect in order to consider this software for evaluation. And so, yes, we're looking at the buyer's journey. Yes, I want to understand the product and your competitive landscape and all of those things. But I'm looking at it purely from a buyer's perspective, where I'm saying, if you had 30 seconds with me in an elevator and you had to tell me what you do, give me the 30,000 foot view of the market. At that point, you're going to say, okay, I'm a customer service help desk software. Makes sense. We typically work with SMB companies. Cool. And we typically work with the customer service departments in there. And the biggest thing that we solve is just we help them manage the volume of like ticketing requests that they get if they have a huge customer base and they need require a lot of service. That took me 10 seconds. How many B2B companies, you go to their website right now and you can't figure that out?
The majority.
Very small, right? And then you can dig in further. Okay, well, what's the alternative right now that the buyer is doing? They're either doing it manually, it's time consuming, here are all the risks. They're using spreadsheets. Here, if they're using a solution, here are like 3 or 4 top competing solutions. Okay, well, what is different about you, right? There are risks to using other solutions or doing it manually. What is our actual like differentiated value? But in other words, like why pick you over them? And it could be something very specific, or usually is something very specific and not what the company thinks is their differentiator. I asked one company, I'm like, what do you think your differentiator is? And they said AI boosted. I'm like, okay, we'll talk about that a little bit more. So sometimes I will ask the company what they think. And I think that's where the research component is different between some consultants, is that they take what the company says at face value. Unless you're like some kind of positioning expert or something like that, then you're like, okay, I'm here to help you figure that out. I'm not there to figure it out for them. I'm there to ask them, is that really the truth? I mean, I don't know if it's really the truth. I'll look through all the stuff and then I marry some of that external perception. So I go out on the internet agnostically and picture myself as that buyer, and what agnostic sites am I going to? What are they saying on Reddit? I collect some of that information and then I walk through all these activities that we're mapping. So what's the state of the market, the competitive landscape? Let's talk about the product. And let's talk about, you think you're solving these problems, which bundling of these features actually solve each of those problems? And then creating kind of product stories around that. And then that becomes the meat of most of the landing pages, that value proposition and product stories, as I like to call it. Someone called it that for me. And I'm like, I love that. I'm going to start using it. And then the social proof, both the ones that you own and the agnostic proof that we can find on third-party websites, FAQs and objections. What are you actually hearing on sales calls? Not the ones that are like, why are we the greatest company on earth? Well, let me tell you, buyer. Because we've won 15 awards you've never heard of that we paid to play and forced all our employees to vote on, and and our CEO is the greatest on earth. You've never heard of him, but here he is, the next Elon Musk. And then finally, what's the ask you're making of them? And this is where I feel like so many companies fail a little bit, is because just because they think your information, your first name, last name, your email address, your company name, your title, all this precious information, just because they don't value it doesn't mean the individual doesn't. That is literally their only leverage online, is their personal information and access to their time. And you are asking for both very willy-nilly. How many times you go to a landing page and there's a form right up top? Give us all your leverage, and we're not even going to tell you what the hell we do, right? We don't even know if we're for you, but submit your information so we can qualify you. Sir, no, it's the other way around. The buyer is qualifying you. So you need to earn that. You need to work for that. And so those are the components we gather. I have a 60-minute call with them. And I do this by myself. I tried doing it with workshops. It just ends up being a big argument between all these stakeholders because they don't know. They don't know these things. They're very clear questions. They don't know. So I take all that documentation. I go run the research. I come back. We have a 60-minute call and we walk through this. And it's basically me holding up a mirror to them and saying, this is the perception of your company and the product and what I think your perception should be. And it's like one day, you wake up, you're like, dang, I'm feeling good today. My hair, I'm having a good hair day. And then your husband takes a candid picture of you, like playing with the kids, and you look like, like some kind of ogre. And you're like, oh, great, amazing. So it's how you view yourself and the perception of you externally. And at that point, we create this alignment where it's like, okay, this is the perception we're going for. I have a good representation of the product. And those discussions are really great when they're reacting to what it is. Those workshops go better. And after we're aligned on that, then we move on to writing the landing pages. That is only a third of the process. So I'm going to stop there and let you ask questions.
That's amazing. Like I think it's awesome that you're doing it yourself and that you have it so structured. Like just, completely tangentially to all of this, like as someone who's also starting their own business and trying to get this off the ground, like I know we're talking about process, but like I'm literally the definition of like the cobbler's son, where it's just like, I don't have shoes. I think it's really cool to hear you talking about it, to see the structure, to understand how you're approaching it and where you're coming from. And then like, I love this idea of, showing them the reflection in the mirror, because, internal stakeholders generally don't have awareness of the competitive landscape, even though they know who their competitors are. They definitely aren't on Reddit or any of these channels that, they're just going on G2 and Capterra and whatever and reacting to whatever's on there. And then like, I work here, so clearly it's the best place, it's the best solution, It's the best product. Like, how can anything better ever exist? So like, the idea that you are able to just kind of like get the story, understand the details, learn what's going on, and then come back and be like, hey, cool, I love what you think about yourself, but here's what everyone else thinks about you. Like, that's got to be this remarkable awakening. And then that's got to buy you a lot of space and time to actually then go do your work, because now it's not just like, hey, I as an individual think this. I also think this, but so do my millions of friends on everywhere on the internet. So I love that.
And I'm going to give you a solid couple of examples of that mirror thing, because how many times does a company want to create a category or call themselves something really fancy because they're like, yeah, this is great, this is really going to hit the mark. And so I have two company examples. One is a security automation questionnaire. I've used this example tons of times. And then when we ran some like search queries to see what people were actually searching for, coming to their site, looking at that, they're all looking for vendor risk assessment software. Totally different. Even Google's nuances and natural language isn't going to pick up that those are synonyms for each other. It's just not going to pick up. So you're losing all of these people who are actually searching for vendor risk assessment software, because that's the accepted term for the problem, by trying to be fancy. The other one is customer service and support software, but people are just saying, what help desk software is out there? They're
Absolutely.
going to use vernacular that is just common language. That's what buyers are using, whether you are CEO or whether you are a specialist or someone internal. And then just today we had a conversation where it's a managed IT services and solutions company. And it's funny because my paid partner, actually, his mom is the target audience for that. So he texted his mom ahead of the audit and said, hey, mom, if you were searching for someone to like help with your systems and tools and stuff like that for your law firm, what would you be looking for? And she goes, probably like IT consultant for law firms, not MSP, not managed solutions provider. So there are things like that where that's how they're thinking. And I think that's the disconnect, is we try so hard to be smart when we need to try even harder to be just simple. It's almost like reversing the complexity that we've added into the process unnecessarily in the name of like professionalism or trying to seem bigger than we are. That's the fun of it, actually, is like, I'm going to rummage through the mess and find the gold,
So that was going to be the question I asked you actually here, where it's like, you have different companies, different sizes, different target audiences, different industries, different all of the things, right? Like the research process can't be the same for all of them, I imagine. So, shout out mom, because that's awesome that you were able to do that. But, when you think about different businesses and different clients that you want to shine a mirror on, how do you know where to go, or where do you start?
I typically start with 5 pieces of documentation. That's what I ask everybody, regardless if they're big or small. Typically, I don't work with a lot of like early stage companies because they're not running paid, and they just kind of qualifies itself there. They don't really need help with landing pages because they're not at the stage to create them. If they have a 5-page website, they're lucky. So like they're not in that space. But most of the companies I work with are like 5 million and above, but most are sitting in that like 100 to 200,000 range, like 200 million range. So like pretty big. And so they have a lot of this work that's done, but it's been done over the years and passed so many hands. So I like to look at what they have right now. And I've been on marketing teams where I haven't even seen this documentation myself for the own companies that I worked at. So I'm like, it's so interesting to me too, because I'm like, dang, I should have done a little more of this when I was in-house. Like I'll take accountability for that. But one, I have a questionnaire that's really simple. And I say, it's going to take you less than 15 minutes to fill out. Because remember, one of the problems I'm trying to solve is that burden on the marketing teams. They don't have time. I'm not trying to assign them work. It's going to take you 15 minutes, but it'll just make sure that I'm directionally headed in the right way. And The second thing then in that questionnaire, I also ask them for links. So if you have any ICP messaging type documentation, the latest version, please link it here. If you have your sales pitch deck, if you're, more sales led, please show that to me because I want to make sure that what we're promising on the landing page is actually going to be achieved on the calls and what we're promising them solution wise with the sales team. I also ask for any competitive information, battle cards, things of that nature. And then 4 is any product related information. So typically internally, they'll have like some kind of data sheet or some kind of list of features and things like that. But I also ask them to prioritize in the questionnaire where I say, just ask them a question. Who are you targeting? What department are you targeting? What company, and it's always some fancy answer and I'm like always dialing it back. But I like to know what they think their perception is. Then look at the documentation that usually has an altered different sense, and then what the external perception is. So there's 3 things that we're going to marry. And I tell them. So the reason I even had the question, I didn't for the longest time, but sometimes we would get into an argument in the workshops where it was like, we're arguing about the list of features and that's not what we should be arguing about. And so this way I know I'm at least headed directionally in the right, way. And then we can actually talk about the meat of it. So the questionnaire just level sets. And then that way no one can be like, well, you have the wrong set of features. I'm like, well, I took it from the questionnaire. So this documentation for that reason. So I told you the process continuously evolves because I'll run into a hiccup with one company, update the process. Run into a hiccup with the next company, update the process. It evolves with every single engagement. And what it looked like when I started to what it looks like now is insane. I have a screenshot of the first information I collected, and it was one table with my client and her competitors and what the product overlap was. That was the extent of my research at the beginning. And now it's this whole Figma board, but it's very digestible. Like once you walk through, it's like, okay, I get it. I also now am employing subcontract writers, but they all have to be specialized in B2B and B2B SaaS. So I will not just hire anyone off the street and writing web copy to help me with some of the workload. But I have walked them through that or shown them just sent them the link to the alignment call. So they have context on this before they write. And they're like, this is so great because it cuts out all the questions that we would ask before we start writing. So it also helps, the teams on this side kind of accomplish some of those things. But yeah.
Well done. That's really cool. And I love that you called out the fact that the process is constantly updating and evolving because the second your process is static, it's dead. The world is changing. The world keeps spinning. Processes need to keep evolving. So good on you. And I love that you've gone from this table to this Figma board, and it's helping not just you, but your team and your clients as well. So
thank you.
So you have this amazing research now, right? You've built out this Figma board. You've highlighted everything. You've read everything. You've done the Lord's work, as they say.
Yes, I've embedded like a method actor. I've become the buyer. Yeah.
Very cool. And that's also honestly another really cool way to look at it, right? Where it's again, I, as the person selling this thing, believe it should be sold this way. And you're like, I, as the person buying this thing, completely disagree with that. So it's a really cool kind of just perspective shift as well. But you've got the research now. You're finished apologizing, right?
Yeah.
Because I think this is where this started. So you're finished apologizing. What happens next?
Now the fun happens. If I ask you, Dimitri, how would you write a landing page? How would you answer that? And I'm not talking about, put a form here or whatever, but what would be your process to writing that?
I mean, it would be the answer to your question would be poorly, is how I would do it. But I would start with what I'm trying to convince someone to, buy or take an interest in. Not some giant, we're the best, we do all these things. I would start with the one thing. But again, I feel like I may have some experience in this department.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, start with one thing, figure out what the value of that one thing is, figure out what problems it solves. Definitely answer all of the FAQs.
Yeah. Definitely add the FAQs. I swear I've always been adding that.
I knew that way before 20 minutes ago.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah, no, it starts with one thing for me.
When I ask someone, and even when I talk to the writers and stuff, they're all like, so how many pages do you want me to write? And I'm like, what do you mean? how do you price your stuff if you're not doing it by wireframe? And I'm like, because everybody writes it like that, right? I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write my landing page. Okay, I'm going to write a product landing page. We're going to talk about the product and we're going to write it start to finish. And then here's a wireframe that's completed, the end. I don't write my stuff like that. So I call it the Chipotle Framework, which is, if you think about Chipotle's business model, and if you're international and don't know what Chipotle is, please go look it up, because I've had this issue too. I'll get on discovery calls, all like British people, and they're like, Chipotle, what are you talking about? And then I'm like quickly Googling, like, what's a British equivalent? They know what it is, but sometimes it'll be like some other country and they're like, what is she talking about? But so Chipotle, fast food chain here in the US, primarily in the US, but they have all of these different ingredients, right? And if you look at the Chipotle menu, it's kind of ingenious because you look at it, they have the same ingredients. And then they're like, hey, do you want a burrito? Do you want a quesadilla? Do you want a salad? Right? It's the same ingredients. It's just packaged up differently. I don't know how wildly the taste changes either. It's just someone comes in and is like, I'm in the mood for a burrito today. But if you get the bowl, it literally tastes the same.
Same thing.
It's just the method of eating it. It's based on preference of the user. I think that the core set of information at a company captured in that buyer's journey map and those activities is essentially the same, right? Those are all the ingredients. So I actually write my landing pages in a modular fashion. And so this is going to be so hard for me to articulate verbally versus like showing somebody, but I actually write it like that, like as if it was a Chipotle buffet. So if the meat is the problem that we're solving, right? I write the problem blocks. A company has 3 products, or if they have a single product that serves 3 segments, I will write out the problem block for each product or each segment altogether. So in that mindset, when I'm writing, I'm thinking about the problem. I'm in the mindset of the problem. I'm like deep in it, right? And then when I move to the solution blocks that match each of those problems, right? I'm going to write the solution blocks for what the overall problem is that we solve. What is the solution to X problem? What is the solution for this vertical, this segment, right? And that's how I do it. And then the social proof is another ingredient. And I collect a bucket of proof that companies can just pick and choose from, so that it's not the same 3 testimonials on every page on your website. How many times do you see that? Also majority, right? And then finally the ask. And the ask is, what happens next? If I give you my precious information, are you laying the expectations for me? Some of the FAQs and the objections. And then I have a section that's just the heroes, where this one's a little more fluid because it just depends on what the preference is. So I have a set typically that I go for with most companies, but it can vary then depending on companies. But I've created like a core set of these are some mix of these landing pages you're going to have. One is a product, one is a comparison, one is a trust. If someone was looking up like Calendly reviews, so it's more trust forward, demo pricing. Obviously, if you're PLG, it might look a little bit different. And then a primary offer. If you have multiple products or segments, do you have an overall encompassing page that would probably serve as like a first touch point page in, paid journey. And the reason I write it like this, because they're like, okay, you're still writing it for each of those things, just put it together. And I'm like, no, because what ends up happening is now my customers have this bucket of ingredients that someone's made for them. And they can Tetris it together to make any variation of dozens of landing pages if they wanted to, without having to do the work all over from scratch, right? Because your value propositions and themes aren't going to change all that much. Your FAQs and objections aren't going to change all that much, maybe a little bit over time. But that's where I think some of my website background comes in, because I've worked with my dev teams to be like, hey, you're going to create all these design blocks so that I can just like pull in this block on this page, this block on that page, shared blocks across these 3 pages. And so when I create and write landing pages, that is exactly how I write too. And I make my writers also write that way, which they've never done. So they're like, but then they love it. They're like, this is great, because I feel like I'm not rewriting the same block over and over again in a different way. I can just literally drag and drop it. And then with paid landing pages, you don't have to worry about the SEO component with the duplicate content and things like that. So it just makes it so much of an efficient process to do it that way. And so I don't price by wireframe, because sometimes if my client needs 5, 9, whatever, it doesn't matter. We write the same amount of blocks and we Tetris them together based on what they need to serve and, like what their ads are, what the ad intent is, what the campaign intent is.
I mean, during the pitch process, that must be really cool. Like that's got to be an eye-opening moment for a potential client to see that and just be like, "Oh, wow, I'm paying in my mind for 1, 2, 3 landing pages, but I'm getting a dozen or
Yes.
more."
And they get that Figma forever, even after I'm long gone. So they literally have it forever. And the reason that those frameworks are like what they are is because you can see that none of them are like some crappy gated content framework or event framework. They're not short-term campaign tactics. They are ones that will literally just be on forever. So that's why I call them foundational landing pages, because you never have to worry about going back and turning them off or whatever. They are just like running the ship. They're your foundation of your house while you're decorating the rest of it with other stuff and events and whatever. Those are always humming in the background, no matter how much, the aesthetics of your house change over time. It is funny because I used to, when I started, I was like, here's a pitch deck and walk them through a 30-page pitch deck. And I'm like, God, I hated that when I was in-house. I got rid of it. And so once I got some reps in, all I do now in my discovery calls is I talk to them, I figure out what their problems are. Typically, it's the same problems. And then I pull up an existing client's workspace and show them. And I'm like, this is literally what you get. This is in the process with this client. These are some of the problems we stumbled upon. Here are the blocks that we're going to make, and we're going to Tetris together for them. And yeah, so they get to see it. But I just told a friend this yesterday. Actually, are you familiar with Lachey, Lewis?
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. You were at Drive, and so Lachey and I talk almost every day about our business, because when you're in-house and you have coworkers, it's like cool, you're all in it together. And then now when you're out, you have to make your own coworkers. So she's one of my coworkers, and we talk about the businesses all the time. And I literally told her just yesterday that every time I show someone the modular thing, they're like, oh, yeah, I mean, why wouldn't we write it this way? It's so obvious. Like, it should have been done this way. And it's just so funny because I present it as a new idea, but then suddenly it's like assumed that should have been the norm all along. And I came up with that idea in the shower one week, right before I sat down work. And I came and sat down, I changed the entire process right there. And that's one of the iterations that happened.
That's really cool. I love that. I talk about a lot of this in terms of Legos, and Tetris is the best game ever made. So I love that you're talking about it in terms of Tetris. But like landing pages, website pages, design, even to a certain extent, video to a certain extent, like it's all about the building block. Having different pieces to pull from to consolidate and build, like put together ultimately. It's like one of the, in my mind, one of the greatest ways to maintain consistent messaging, consistent branding, consistent kind of look and feel around everything that you're trying to do in whatever medium on whatever channels. But like when you're constantly reinventing the wheel, I feel like you're iterating in one way or another, and it may be a good iteration, it may be a bad iteration, but you're not where you kind of need to be. And so like I've always had this a similar thought around like websites and how you should, I think your content here is more specific, but like for me it was like, I don't care what you do, just do it within these constraints. As long as you have the pieces, you can be free, go forth, do whatever.
Color inside the lines.
Yeah. No, like inside, like stay inside the line. Like the lines are going to be broad and wide, but like stay within them. And like, I love that you are approaching it this way for your clients, because, going back to what you were saying about time, going back to their own constraints, right? Like all of a sudden now it's not, I have 1 or 2 landing pages. It's, I have a million landing pages. Not a million. If someone's paying you for 1 million, take the bag on that one. But like, it's like I have a dozen, I have however many. Like that's fantastic. And one of the questions I have for you based on this, right? Like, foundational landing pages, I think is this great concept. What about companies who are doing more kind of like, we just launched an ebook, we're launching a report, we're something that's a little more time bound, that is like, a one-off that's going to disappear in a month or two?
I don't really touch those. I feel like in B2B, we've just gotten so good at that kind of landing page because we take and adopt those same principles across all landing pages across the entire funnel, right? Like whether they're mid funnel or bottom of funnel, like we're going to throw a form right at the start. We're going to ask you to marry us before you've had a chance to date us. So I don't even know who the heck we are. Like you were the weirdo on Tinder that just took it too far with the first conversation, And so I feel like they've got the tofu stuff like pretty figured out, like events and that kind of stuff. The other piece is even if they did need help with that, they're such like short-term dopamine fixes, and you can borrow a lot of strategies from B2C for those types of pages because the gratification is instant. So that ends up being more of a sales funnel issue because you can get a ton of downloads and then they have like the SDRs on them like dogs, like go get him or whatever. And I think that's more of the issue with the gated content thing than using it as a method to like nurture or create a list to eventually serve them more valuable content and then bring them down the line. So I feel like they need less help in that area. I really saw a problem when I was like, when someone's trying to figure out what the hell you do, like you're not making that abundantly clear. And you're not doing that with like a search intent, like that actual search intent matching the landing pages. Like how many times they just dump you on the homepage? You're like, man, if Old Navy did that to me, I'd be pissed if I was looking for pants and they dumped me on the homepage. So that's the kind of stuff that we always have to think about. And I feel like they can go to a billion HubSpot articles and figure out ways to optimize and CROify, a top of funnel landing page, and it would work because they would get those conversions. It's much harder to look at a page that's more mid to bottom funnel and then go, oh my gosh, I'm not getting any conversions. I'm going to turn this off. When the reality is that they're collecting information about your product, they're going away. They have to check with their boss, check with their stakeholders, build this internal business case based on the information that's out there. And they'll likely come back to your main website and sign up for a demo or sign up for the product when they're ready and they have the approvals. But that does not mean that your campaign isn't succeeding or working. As long as you're driving the density of ICP in there, you have the right people going there, they're consuming information on the page, you're going to measure a top of funnel page and a mid to bottom very differently because the mid to bottom is more information heavy and the top is like, here's a piece of content that you can consume at a later time. So it's just what that transaction piece, but then they assume a top of funnel and the bot, I want them all to perform the same way. Why aren't we getting, I've had this question asked of me thousands of times. How come we got 1,000 on the state of X download book, but then we only have 50 on this like demo page? I'm like, that's like asking someone why they aren't standing in line for Disney ride and they're not even in Florida yet. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's no digital wait. Like they're making their way. They're coming, give them time. They're making their way.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and I mean, is that like, spoiler alert, like, is that the next part of this, measurement and tracking?
See, I'm giving you the segues. You don't even have to.
I honestly, like, this has been great. This has been super easy for me. I truly don't know why I'm speaking on this one.
It's so fun to like dig in so deep because I've been on other podcasts that are talking, like little live shops at workshops and stuff. And the best ones are always the ones I can get a lot more detailed in. But I'm talking about things that I haven't actually talked about before. So I'm loving it myself. I think there'll be some like really good clips for us to share with people. But
my notebook is like all just, yeah.
So the 90-day engagement. So the first 30 days, buyer's journey map. Second 30 days, we're creating the landing page modules and delivering Tetris together, the first set of recommendations. And then they can kind of take it from there if they want to create other variations. They just have to write a new hero, which I will tell them these are ways that you can write a new hero. Okay, awesome. Go for it. And then finally, the last 30 days, and this was something I wasn't even planning to add on, but I got requested from a couple of clients who were like, hey, I've launched the landing pages, but like, am I doing it correctly? I don't know if I'm testing the right thing. Like, when do I test a new thing? I wish you'd stayed with us a little bit longer. So at that point, I'm like, fine. So I extended. I'm like, this is the meat of it, where it's like, how do I manage and maintain these? If these are going to be part of my house forever, I got to make sure and check it for cracks. I need to make sure that there isn't water heading towards my foundation. I need to make sure that like I know all the strong points and that it's still in good standing, or if I need to change something or repair something. I stay with them for the last 30 days. And during this time, I stay with them for about 2 testing cycles. So about 2 weeks each. Most of the companies, when they ask me, what tools do I need? They think they have to buy some like fancy A/B testing tool. And I'm like, what do you have? And most of them have some kind of web analytics. So it'll be, Google Analytics 4, and some people have moved away from that. Whatever you have, that's fine. So we can use a web analytics tool. And then The second piece is I think it's a non-negotiable for B2B companies to have a heat mapping tool. Most of those are free for at least the first 2,000 sessions, which actually is a really good sample size, 2,000 sessions per month. You don't really need much more than that to make a decision. So you don't even really have to buy that, right? So that's another problem I help solve, is that I don't want my teams to have to like buy that. And then once they do this, we look at the data in 2 weeks and see how this initial hypothesis goes, because I'm not promising these are the perfect landing pages. What I'm giving you is the first best hypothesis based on the information that we have. And then we're going to see from there whether it's resonating. Like only 30% of people ever make it to the bottom of a page. So are we moving to 40%? Okay, that's improvement. Is there an incremental lift in hand raisers across your website? Because I told you most people can't find the landing page again. After they get the approvals, they come direct to the site. And how many times have you had a conversation internally as a marketer that goes, yeah, our direct traffic was higher this week. Someone must be talking about us or something, whatever. Yeah, it has nothing to do with all the campaign stuff that you're running and buyers collecting information and then coming back and just being interested because they have all the information they need in order to now finally engage with you. I always use this statistic, even though they're in the hot seat right now. But Hockey Stack said it takes an average of 31 touch points for a low ACV product, for them to even engage with them and become an MQL. So I'm just going to say, specific or not, but the data basically shows for B2B, and even Gartner will tell you multiple touch points before they engage with you. And that's what we're shooting for, is are people coming back to the website, right? What's your return visitor rate? And these are vanity metrics that were given a bad name and now no marketer wants to touch them, but they are either positive or negative indicators of success. And so we are looking at all of those little signals. We're looking at the heat map data. We're looking at the call recordings to see where they're getting stuck. And heat maps are where I found that FAQs were such a hot thing, because with one of my clients, 15% of all clicks was on the fourth FAQ and the FAQ list. 165 clicks.
That's unbelievable. So like not only were they scrolling all the way down, but they were scrolling even further down into the FAQ list to get to that.
And looking at that fourth question. So then you take that fourth question, you make it a block. You put it up earlier on the page because you're like, this is obviously something very important to them. Now you see that they're consuming. Okay, go down. So those are the ways you massage. And then I help them build like a self-building testing roadmap. So here are 4 ways we can tackle this headline. The first couple of weeks, let's try this one. Second couple of weeks, let's try this one. So instead of an A/B testing tool, we're going to go ratchet and do pre and post testing, because you can always go back and re-add the headline that did work. But this is a time-based test where you can kind of see, did this work? Did this not work? We have 4 different headlines. That's 4 different tests. I only recommend changing one variable at a time. So, we're going through. And so during that last month, we're going to create like pretty good list that would carry them for months and months for testing. Not a huge burden to manage, because all they have to do is sit down with coffee, 5 minutes every couple of weeks, look at a couple of recordings, see what thing is, make a hypothesis, change something, and see how it goes for the next 2 weeks.
Can I ask real quick then, like why would an A/B test not work, or why is that not your preference? Because I'm just thinking, like in a world of 4 headlines, you're running 4 testing cycles, whereas like obviously you could do A versus B versus C versus D, but like I think the more variations you get, like the worse the data ultimately gets. But like you could do two cycles of A/B and then C/D. Like, why do you prefer doing them consecutively?
Because I don't want them, if they have the ability in-house and they have the tool already, absolutely, we can run multiple testing cycles during that last month I have with them. Most companies don't have the tool, and I don't want them to go through the process and get one. You can also do it from the ad side, but a lot of them are also not sophisticated on the ad side. There's a lot of messes and things that happen there. So I do provide audits for them there, just selfishly to make sure the landing pages do well. So that happens in the first month. And then I have a paid partner who kind of like, works with them if they want them to. And so sometimes he'll run the test on his end with more like multiple creative and trying to split it up that way, or cloning the landing page and having 2 variations and seeing which one works, things of that nature. So there are other ways we can do it, but I'm honestly trying not to complicate it for them. I don't want them to be like, okay, go into the ad platform. They're like, you lost me. Like, that's not going to happen. So unless I know who's managing the ads for him, if I do, I'd be like, hey, you can run some ads, run some variations here. Or if the client gives them publishing access to the actual landing pages to maintain it for them, I'm like, that should be their responsibility. But I'm just trying to not make it complicated for them. So I'm like, you can just do it old school, ratchet way before these tools existed. It may not be the cleanest and it may take a little while, but at least you have one testing cycle to report to your CMO every month.
We've apologized for doing all the research. We've had lunch at Chipotle. I love that example. Subway could be an international variation that just occurred to me.
Yes. And she used the Subway analogy in her talk. And I was so mad at her because I thought that she was going to say the same thing, but she obviously used it in a different reference. And then later on, I was like, great talk. Wonder where you got the inspiration for the Subway analogy.
Where'd you hear that? Yeah.
Yeah. And she's like, oh, I didn't say the same thing. I'm like, yeah, you're lucky. You're lucky because this would have been a scene at Exit 5, okay?
As someone in the audience, I would have loved that. And so we've built the modular blocks. We've built the pages. We've tested them. Any other considerations? Are there any other things that you think about before essentially like wrapping up?
Not necessarily. Once we get to that point, I'm hoping I look at two things. And the biggest thing is I have this very strong empathy and bias for the in-house marketer because I was that in-house marketer. I'd lost my entire team, no backfills. My budgets were slashed. My resources was sliced thin. My growth targets were up 20%. I was 8 months pregnant. Like it was insane. I was trying to do so much. And so when I look at wins, even the way I ask for testimonials, I'm like, hey, I would love if you would write, if you had a good experience, I would love if you wrote something for me. And if you did it this way, where you talked about definitely a company win, like, you were able to drive pipeline and all of these things, but I would love a personal win on your end. And so a lot of my clients will give me a marketer win and a company win. And I love seeing that because the marketer win is like, I'm just so much more confident in my programs. I just am so much more confident as a performance leader. My VP of product loved this. That made me really look good. And I love that because they need it so much right now. We're like one of the first departments to go when a company's struggling, yet the ones that are now tied to revenue. And so I knew when I wanted to start this business, like I was never going to be a grow at all costs, but I wanted to be a help at all costs. And so I love like hearing that. And I try to collect that feedback as well, because that means more to me than some pipeline number that we hit.
Fantastic. But the last question I like to ask everyone is what's next? Like what are you working on? What are you thinking about? Like, where does your process get applied next?
So the first thing is people will be surprised to know because my positioning is very heavily around landing pages, but I do have a couple of gigs that are more like fractional head of growth, fractional digital and website, because sometimes they want to skip the landing page stuff and they're like, please help me with all of this other stuff that's going on. So I have a few clients like that, which obviously then, when you first go out, you're like, this is great. I have a retainer and it's amazing. But I love the productized side of the landing pages and being able to help a variety of companies. And I love the content creation aspect. Like it really just fills me with joy to like be able to articulate something in a graphic and be able to showcase that. I want to be able to do more of that. And I haven't because I've just been so busy. And landing pages only account for about 50% of my business right now, which is so funny because the other 50% is all this like random stuff. And renewals are coming up in December, and I'm actually going to ask not to renew. Hopefully they don't hear on this podcast for the first time. I'm going to say, you know what, this has been great. It's been so great working together, but I just really want to focus on the business and focus on the landing page thing and see how far I can take that. After talking to a former client, he was just like, you need to start removing yourself from the weeds because you have a great process. I feel like you can train some people, get some specialized writers. So I did listen to him, and I'm working with some specialized writers in B2B and B2B SaaS that I actually sourced some from the Exit 5 community because, Exit 5 is amazing. Yes. Getting people that I know I can trust, obviously paying them well to like do their components of the job. I'm going to try to find someone who can also help with the testing iteration side of the house as well. I'll still be the main point of contact for my clients, but 2025 will be the first year that I will be 100% landing pages because I've actually turned down companies every month to be like, hey, you can book with me in November. And you know how SaaS is. They're like, Well, I needed you like yesterday.
Yeah, of
I'm not
course.
waiting. I'm not waiting 2 months. Like, what the heck? So I got sick of saying no to the things that I actually wanted to do and saying yes to the stuff that I was like, eh. So I'm changing that. And that's what I'm going to work on. The process is then going to iterate even faster at that point. And I told you this backstage, but potentially having another kid, and I want to make sure that the business can function without me and it doesn't abruptly stop. I'm not pregnant right now, but but just saying that if that's in the plans, and I want to be family focused. I work 3 days a week because my son's home with me Mondays and Fridays, and that's hard because I'm drowning. And that's the whole point, is we're not supposed to be drowning. So how can I actually enjoy those days and making sure my priorities always not compromising on my family, but compromising and letting go of the things I need to in the business. That's the whole purpose of a lifestyle business. And that's what I'm accomplishing, hopefully laying the groundwork this quarter, and 2025 we're going to run. And potentially next year starting a micro newsletter. I hate the thought of writing long-winded newsletters. So I'm wondering if I could do a little like landing page snack delivered to people's inbox, every week. Something just really tactical, a little bit different that they can take and apply. But that way to just have a connection with people outside of LinkedIn in case LinkedIn decides to kick me out for saying ratchet too many times. So, just the over-reliance on a single channel.
That's incredible. I'm so excited for you.
Thank you.
People hire Tas, or, if she has the bandwidth for you, frankly. I
will soon.
No, 100%. And, I need to call out your LinkedIn. Folks should be 100% following you on there because your content is excellent and there's so many great tips, and you are like an open book on there in terms of just like sharing a lot of what you're working on and how you're thinking about it, which I think is really helpful. I know it's helped me. I've definitely taken some of your tips for my own website. So thank you for that. This has been awesome. This has been so much fun. Thank you for letting us all in and sharing. And I'm really, really excited about your 2025.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for your show, and I'm proud of you, and I'm so glad we got to meet, and we'll be friends forever. And I can't wait to see how you grow as well.
100%. Friends forever, everyone.
Friends forever. BFFs.